Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first season of Vintage Club Conversations. Today, we have with us Shruti Kapoor. Shruti is the founder CEO of Wingman, which was acquired by Clari in 2022. And Shruti has really seen the journey of 5x growth in the last 18 months. And now she leads the international business for Clari across India and APAC. She is passionate about helping revenue teams hitting their goals through better conversations with their customers. And I let Shruti talk more about this. Welcome to the first season of Vintage Club Conversations, Shruti. Thank you so much for being on this episode. We really appreciate your time.
Great to be here.
So tell me, how is it going at Clari currently for you? Being a part of Clari for almost 2 years, how was your transition, moving from a few sales folks at Wingman to a scaled revenue team at Clari?
It was different in many, many ways. Of course, you expect some differences when you're going from a small team to a large team. But I think there are even many more differences when you think about selling to like a SMB or a mid-market versus selling into the enterprise. And I think for me, there was a lot of learning and a lot of new observations, seeing how, the selling in the enterprise segment works differently. So, a couple of things, right? Like when there is a pipeline review meeting happening, it's very interesting to see, whereas, in the past, we would have probably thought about like, okay, this is our champion. What have they come and told us? What were their needs? But when you think of an enterprise sales process, it's almost like for each of them, we have an account plan. There are multiple stakeholders. We understand, what their motivations are. Very often, we even know, who is looking for maybe a career move, how will this purchase maybe impact their own growth, or maybe what some of their challenges are, at a personal role level, right, because of which they might consider buying a tool. All of those things were very new to me, and it was a lot of fun observing those in action.
Oh, absolutely. I think enterprise sales is a lot about project management than just selling, even when it comes to onboarding the customers. So, very interesting insight and change for you, I'm sure. So, since it's the beginning of the year, I would like to talk a bit about your previous year and what this year, 2024, looks like for your sales organization. To start with, we have all seen that SaaS businesses overall growth was slow last year as compared to the last 5-6 years where there was crazy growth. All over the last year, a lot of events have happened, right, from geopolitical situation, some borderline inflation, and general slowness in business. So keeping all this in mind, how are the last few quarters for Clari?
So in fact, we are actually in 5 days away from closing the year, because we closed the year end of January. And I would say the first half of the year was pretty challenging, right? Like even though when we thought of 2020, the end of 2022, 2022 itself had been pretty bad. And so companies were getting ready to revise their targets in terms of growth, etc., for the next year. But I think first half was probably in many ways came out even below expectation. But interestingly enough, I think in the second half, we are seeing a fairly significant shift in overall sentiment. And we are seeing that, growth has picked up, the deal pipeline has picked up. And in fact, I think in pockets, especially in EMEA for us, we are probably looking to exceed, the targets for the year by, more than 150%. So I think it's been very up and down, but I think the persistence has paid off. And of course, with 5 more days to go to the end of the year, we'll probably see a lot of change happening in the next 10 days.
Yeah, absolutely. Selling till the last day of the year and last day of the month and last day of the quarter. That's how life is. But it's interesting to see, last couple of quarters have picked up. I think a lot of SaaS founders and sales leaders would be really happy to hear that, because that is one of the, indicators where even other SaaS businesses might be going. And I'm sure, you would be bombarded with a lot of Gen AI boardroom conversations because generative AI is everywhere and it is catching on in a big way across functions, right? Looks like 2024 is only going to accelerate its adoption, especially in sales. So, what are your thoughts on this, and what are some of the other trends you think we will see in sales in 2024?
Yeah, I think if I imagine what the world looked like in January 2023, right? It's even hard to imagine how much technology has changed, right, and how much has come in uh, to sales tools because of Gen AI this year. Right. And I think increasingly we are beginning to take so much of it for granted that it feels like it's been there forever. And so, when I was thinking about this question, I was literally like, okay, let me see what could I do in Jan last year and what can I do in Jan this year, right? A few things. Of course, I couldn't even imagine going in and asking questions on top of data, right? And we all saw, I think HubSpot came out and, showed us how they were thinking about reimagining data and dashboards and analytics. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that what we've seen really surprising with this wave is that how quickly everybody is adopting it, not just the startups, but even the large companies like HubSpot, Salesforce. I was listening to the World Economic Forum, summit where Sam Altman and Mark Benioff were talking about the whole
Yeah.
AI wave, and it's amazing, right? Like it's not just new companies whose life depends on Gen AI, but even companies like Salesforce going in and being all over that narrative. So I think that's a big difference from all of the technology waves we've seen over the last few decades. And a few examples of what is possible today in the sales world, right? Asking questions of your data, asking questions of your calls, right? Like at the end of a meeting today, I can go in and say, hey, can you tell me what was the customer's reaction to this particular product feature, right? I don't need to go in and try to figure that out across multiple things. It's going to create a nice summary for me just based on that specific question. I can, of course, get summaries. I can get sentiment on top of, different types of topics, right? So I can say, can you show me all instances of positive reactions to this particular thing? Right? I can create follow-up emails automatically, right? I can get AI to,
Yeah.
of course, create personalized emails. I can get AI to come in and give me a summary of everything that has happened in the deal, right? From an email thread. I can use AI to now take a big sales enablement document, which was like, maybe a 10-page competitive deck and say, create a 5 bullet point summary for me that I can include in an email, right? So there is just so much that AI can do for us. And I think sales lends itself very well because it's very language based, right? And
Yeah.
each instance of it is, everything is around the communication. So one is a lot of your data comes in the form of this unstructured language, and a lot of your output in terms of follow-ups is also in the form of unstructured language. So I think it's a perfect use case, and we are going to see a lot of people working on this.
Oh, absolutely. I think the use cases are honestly endless, especially the adoption piece, like in 3 months, they had 100 million users, Chat GPT. That was mind blowing. All the assumptions which people used to take in terms of user training, changing user behavior, all of that was completely different in case of Chat GPT. Great, no, great to know that it is talk of your boardroom as well. So coming on to the challenges, right? I mean, each industry is unique with its own set of challenges, especially influenced by current events or last year's events. So, what challenges are top of mind for you as you start this year?
So I think, I would divide it maybe into two parts, right? One is on the tech side and one is on the business side, right? I think on the tech side, the challenge that is top of mind for me really is that we have, sky high expectations of what AI is going to do for us. And I think they need to be tempered. But sometimes what happens is that, when your expectations are here and something performs here, even though it is much better than where you were initially, right? You're suddenly like, oh no, I'm comparing it here and, this is not living up to my expectations. And you're just going to, go in and, be very negative about it. And maybe you won't adopt it, or maybe you'll, dismiss it as just another hyped trend. But I think that it's important to, while there is that initial excitement and there is a lot of possibility, I think what use cases are most, I would say, plausible today, right, with the accuracy that's available and everything. I think that needs to be fine-tuned and those expectations need to be set, right? And I think that's kind of the big challenge, because I think the expectations that we've set are very high, and a lot of examples that we all see on social media tend to be, they look like, it's going to automate the heck out of everyone's lives. But a lot of that is not going to happen, right? There is going to be a human in the loop. Even if you expect, or even if you are getting like, say, a 99% accuracy on certain things, in a lot of use cases, you can't accept that 1% error rate, right? So you will still need the human in the loop, but you need the human in the loop to be watchful enough to actually identify those 1% error rates. So I think that's kind of going to be the challenge. One is that humans shouldn't get too complacent, and two, they shouldn't, have expectations that are that were set up with social media hype of, great examples that were maybe doctored, as we've heard and seen this year. I think on the business side, the challenge that I'm worried about is, in fact, at the end of last year, what we were seeing was that, maybe this will be another 6 months and the cycle will turn. While we've seen a little bit of turn in the stock markets, we haven't really seen the underlying economic metrics improve as much, right? So I think on the business side, my concern really is that, that upward trend that we are seeing in the stock market, and the overall positive sentiment, is that going to sustain, or is that deviating so much from the economic reality that we are going to see a big bump down? And therefore, what that means in terms of people thinking about businesses, growth, inflation, all of that stuff. So I see that as a challenge, because, so much of the media cycle and so much of our mind space gets occupied by just the tech companies and their performance. But, there is so much depth in the rest of the economy that sometimes dictates everything more fundamentally, but doesn't make the headline as much. So yeah, let's see.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I think the current growth patterns are a little fragile to have full confidence that this is how we are going to sustain for the rest of the year. Totally with you on that.
Yeah, and I
so
feel
last but not the
sorry, I was just saying that as sales teams set their targets for this year, right? I think everybody is in that phase of saying, do I set targets based on, an assumption that the economy won't see as much recovery? Or do I say that, the last 2 quarters have been great, maybe we are just going to go all out and, try and, normalize back to what we thought our growth rates should be 2 years back. So I think that's kind of going to be the challenging question, and where you land up on that debate is going to dictate, the morale of your sales teams, and also how everything else shows up for you this year. It's tempting to actually set up big targets, because then you get bigger budgets, bigger investment, ability to hire and all of that good stuff. But, you also don't want a situation where 4 months down the line, you're looking at, staring through another round of layoffs.
So interesting conversation on the goals, right? Like, how do really sales people set their targets this year? What are your goals and priorities you have set for your sales organization in this new year? And will you be changing any of your existing processes or tools to meet your goals? Since you spoke, a lot about AI use cases or generative AI use cases, having 10x expectation, but AI only being able to do 5x. How are you making sure that there is no disappointment in the organization with this expectation mismanagement from AI tools?
I think that's a tough one, to be honest, because there's also the temptation from the tools to oversell, right? Because to some extent, you're hoping that the underlying technology is going to anyways catch up, right? There's ChatGPT 4.5 or 5 or something that's going to come up and make sure that all the promises that you're making today to your customers will come true sometime this year. But I think to your question on like, how are we thinking about targets and how are we thinking about tools? So I think on the target side, the way we are thinking about it is really to take a more piecemeal approach this year, right? And to be open to saying that what we are putting on paper today is really only something that we have higher confidence on for the first half of the year, and that we are willing to go back and relook at this, later in the year, and then decide what the second half of the year should look like. Which I think is a logical approach, because then you give yourself wiggle room, you make sure that you're closer to reality. And in these uncertain times, it makes sense to be more watchful, right, on shorter time horizons, so that you're responding to change and not just being reactive, comparing yourself against something that was set in a very different time and a mental model. I think on the tool side, what we are honestly looking to do is to be more experimental, right? I think overall, my my own advice for salespeople is that it makes sense to just go out and be much more explorative and friendly with tools. And so the way we are thinking about this is, if you see something useful, go test it out, spend some time, come back, bring it to the team, right? And then, let's go ahead and learn collectively rather than going in and saying, one person runs an evaluation process for 5 tools and then we decide. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think really there are so many PLG type tools today. There are so many different types of things that reps can adopt on their own, there's merit, I think, in allowing people to just have a different attitude towards technology. For a long time, I think for salespeople, technology meant things that were imposed on them. And I think increasingly they're realizing that technology can actually be something that is enabling them and making them smarter and better. And I think this is really the year when they will see that switch come to life. It's going to be much more than what RevOps wants them to do.
Absolutely. I think from both business and tech point of view, one advice is just be nimble this year in making decisions. Don't think too much, don't think for 12 months. Think maybe a quarter at a time or 2 quarters at a time, depending on the size of your organization. Be nimble, change decisions, and adapt to the market conditions. Great. Thank you for being so candid and sharing your thoughts, Shruti. Thank you for joining us today and wish you good luck for 2024.
Thanks, Manisha.